Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second day of our online Readers Advisory Seminar 2021. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which each of us are on. I'm on Wiradjuri country. I pay respect to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other First Nations people. I celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal cultures and languages across Australia. Well, thank you everyone for joining us again this afternoon. It's great to be able to get together in this way. Thanks for pushing through your Zoom fatigue if you haven't. My name is Amy Heap and I work for the Riverina Regional Library. I assume you're pretty used to meeting online, but I will let you know how everything is going to be working this afternoon. And while I explain, it'd be really great if you could introduce yourselves in the chat box. So just let us know your name, what your library is called and whose country you're on. So firstly, it would be appreciated if you could turn off your video and mute yourself during all the presentations. It can be really distracting for the speaker and for everyone else if they can hear what's going on in your office. As you will have seen in the program, we'll be hosting two breakout rooms this afternoon. And these have been created to give us the opportunity for smaller groups of people to discuss the presentations and answer some questions together. Each breakout room will be facilitated by somebody from the Readers Advisory Committee. And you can unmute yourself for these sessions or you can use the chat to comment if you prefer. You don't have to do anything to get into a breakout session. You will just be assigned to them automatically and then returned at the end to the main Zoom room. So seminar programs do tend to be jam-packed with information and you may not have been able to attend both days or all of the sessions, so you'll be able to find the recordings of the talks and all the slides and other information that's shared in the chat in the New South Wales Public Library Wiki, and I will share the link to that in the chat. There we go. And please do make that a favourite so you can use it all the time. You can also find the schedule for today to see what's coming up. That's in the link there as well. So let's get started with our first talk. Lisa Fuller is an award-winning Murray writer living in Canberra, where she's currently doing her PhD in creative writing. Her debut novel, Ghost Bird, and you can see my Goodreads for my review on that book, has won multiple awards, including the 2020 Queensland Literary Awards Griffith University Young Adult Book Award. She has previously published poetry and short pieces in several publications, and she is owned by an insane staffy, lives in a renovation with a very patient partner, and battles her inner critic every day. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks for having me. So you want me to just kick off on that talk that we discussed before? Awesome. Yes. Hi guys. I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm speaking to you from, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement and respect to all of the countries and elders that you're all tuning in from. Sorry, it's weird wording still. Amy just asked me to talk to you a bit about my book, Ghost Bird. It actually came out of my master's. It was a process where I, for the first time, challenged myself to write about my own culture. It was something I'd avoided before because it's just so fraught with the permissions, protocols around that, as well as to me, when I was a younger writer, it felt like too much to take on because it was this huge mammoth, narrative in the media, and it still is about us. And it felt like anything that I wrote would just be constantly having to justify itself against that. The good thing about the Masters was that I was able to free myself of that and just write. And I was thinking about, when I was writing, about myself as a teenager. So I grew up in a really small town, Eidsvold in Queensland. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but repeating what Amy said in the intro, but I'm a Willy Willy woman, also descended from Waka Waka and Gurung Gurung peoples. Murray is our term, a lot like Koori or, Palawa. For certain areas, it's a regional term, very much like a state term. But we don't adhere, of course, to state and territory boundaries. So yeah, when I was growing up, I've always wanted to be a writer, but I resisted that because I had this thing in my head that I didn't want to do the starving artist thing. And, hello, what am I doing now? But with Ghostbird, as a teenager, so in a town of 500 people, you're talking literally, our town library was a bookshelf. Now, before that, I'd spent a few years in Toowoomba, and the Toowoomba Library was my magical place, and my mum and I would just get lost in there for literally hours and hours and my sister, who wasn't much of a book person, would have to hunt us down and literally drag us out of the whole thing. So I went from this huge, gigantic library to this one shelf in the town library, and the school library was a room. And half the room was for the primary school kids, because it was 100 kids from kindergarten up to year 12. So half the library was for the primary schoolers, half the library was the reference materials for the high schoolers, and jammed in the middle were these two shelves with stuff for us high schoolers. Now, I think that says a lot about the school's expectations of us as high schoolers, whether or not we would read. Especially considering half the school was black and half the town was black. So it was a disheartening environment to grow up in, especially because the books that I did pick up either didn't have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in it at all, or what they did have were these really horrifying, stereotypical caricatures that I just, I've never wanted to harm a book. It's anathema to me, but I wanted to harm those books. So when I was writing Ghostbird, I was thinking about growing up as a teenager and that idea that we were only this one thing, this stereotype thing, the problem. It was always a negative. And so I wanted to give them something that was truly us. So if I was going to do that, I had to do it in some really specific ways, and I had to go home and sit down with 6 of my aunties, but for 6 weeks. And I did, the permissions process, and it was a big negotiation. So that's why it felt like to me like I had to set it in my hometown. It had to be about us. It is our culture. It's our spiritual beliefs. But the understanding that I came to with them was it was no real mob, so no real I didn't really talk about the different nations in the town, and I don't really use real family names. So, for example, I'm a Fuller, my grandmother's a Collins, there's the Dodd family, the Williams family, you know what I mean? So none of those real names, and no real people was the other negotiation. That changed a little bit after the fact, but I'll, because I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read it yet, but there's a grandfather figure in there. We lost my grandfather just before I started writing this, and he was a really influential person in my life. And in writing that grandfather, it was a really important part of my grieving process to write him. So I got permission from most of his children to do that. So the grandfather in the story is 100% absolutely my grandfather. And the best compliment that I've had from my family members is that I nailed it. So I'm pretty happy about that. And they're thrilled. They think it's brilliant. The book's also dedicated to him, actually. Now, my family say that I did somewhat trespass on that no real people thing a little bit more too, because in reading it, they've said that, so there's twin sisters at the core of the story. There's their mother. My family all say that it's essentially my mother, my sister, and I in the story. And I wanted to fight them about it, but when I had a closer look at it, I went, oh, yeah, it's not 100% us at all, not like with the grandfather character, but you can see I very much based it on that family dynamic and some of the characterization. Yeah, so it's not 100% us, but I can see, yeah, luckily My mum and my sister are extremely flattered. So it was all good and I could publish it. I just realized I didn't even do an intro to Ghostbird. I'm so sorry. So for those of you who may not have had a chance to read it, Ghostbird's actually about two twins, Stacey and Lainey, in my hometown of Eisvold. Stacey's kind of the good girl, and they're in their last year of high school, and she's just desperate to get out of their small town and experience the world. And Lainey's not interested in any of that. She's kind of doing things that she shouldn't be doing. She's sneaking out with her boyfriend. She's resisting all of the pressure to do well. She's not interested in her education, that sort of stuff. One night, Lainey sneaks out and she doesn't come home the next day. And it sends Tace on this weird push-pull between the rational thinking that she's taught in school and the cultural and spiritual beliefs that she's taught at home that she's resisting, because she starts having these nightmares about what's happening to her sister. And she has to take on community taboos, cultural taboos, social taboos to actually find out what happened to Lainey. So where was I? So I was talking about why I was writing the way I was. So for me, when I was a teenager, like I ended up completely in love with speculative fiction because of the fact that speculative fiction was at least dealing with things that I was struggling with. Now, I didn't read anything that had any people of color in it, but they were talking about otherness. They were talking about racial issues, dealing with things that I could actually identify with and I really enjoyed. So I think, though, I have a real problem. I sit in a really uncomfortable space when people label Ghostbird speculative fiction, because it is based on our spiritual beliefs, and it's very much a thing in Australian culture to refer to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander belief systems as myths and legends, which is really inappropriate and not okay. And when people ask me why, I'll say to them, well, what's your belief? They might be a Christian. And I say, well, how's that Jesus myth working out for you? Not in seriousness, because I was also raised Christian, but it's just to show them that it's disrespectful to somebody's belief system to do that. So then I've come out with Ghostbird, and all these people are like, wait, what genre is it? And I don't really know, to be honest. I think my publisher has marketed it as a thriller. It's kind of, a lot of people are putting it under the speculative fiction umbrella. The word speculative fiction I don't mind so much, because I do love speculative fiction, but it's this really uncomfortable position that places me in. And I wrote an article about it, which went into Kill Your Darlings, called Why Culturally Appropriate Reviews Matter. And the conclusion I've kind of come to is, until our society moves forward and starts to recognise our belief systems as valid, and stops labelling it in these fictitious ways, there's not much I can do about it, because the majority of readers of my book are non-Indigenous people. So for them, this is speculative fiction. For us, this is not speculative fiction. This is very much real for us. So yeah, it's a really weird space to sit in. The other thing that really weirds me out is when people label it as horror. Not because I have anything against horror, but I don't watch it, I don't read it. I'm what we call windy in my community. I'm a big scaredy cat, you know what I mean? The gory horror, I'm not into at all. It doesn't scare me. It's the horror stuff that gets in your head and really messes with you. It freaks me out, and it's not a good idea for me, because it messes with my head for days afterwards. So, I had to sit on a panel of horror writers, and I felt like such a fraud. But at the same time, I'm getting a lot of people saying to me that they were completely terrified. I've had adult people say that they had to sleep with the lights on and they started following the rules that are laid out by the grandmother in the story. I'm like, gold, that's I shouldn't be enjoying scaring people as much as I do, actually. Another big issue that comes up with this, people ask me, why is it set in the 90s? to be brutally honest, it's because that's what I grew up with. After I left our community, all these things, massive change happened. So before I left, we didn't have mobile coverage. We didn't have, internet in the home. You just couldn't afford it. It was too expensive, and it wasn't reliable anyway. So after I left, we got mobile phone coverage, very specific, Telstra, CDMA, and people suddenly started to be able to afford access, and they had internet now in the town library, and the town library was bigger. Suddenly we actually had shelving. It was great. I was so happy for my cousins. But the other thing that happened was ice hit, and ice hit a lot of country communities across the nation. So I don't have that experience that my cousins have. And it would have felt inauthentic to me to try and write their experience. And it's so different from mine, even though it's only, 15 years difference. So the other thing I want to talk about was why YA, because what has shocked me more than anything was people did label this YA. I thought when I wrote Ghostbird that it would have to be adult. There's a lot of swearing, there's a lot of mature content, and that wasn't, me choosing not to do YA. That was me thinking that it wouldn't be okay. Because when I grew up, if a book had one swear word in it, there's no way it was showing up in the school library. But in writing this and wanting to be really authentic and really connect with my cousins and my nieces and my nephews, I wanted to tell something that they could connect with 100% and the absolute truth of our reality. And so to me, it wasn't a choice. It was, the work is written with our dialect of Aboriginal English is in there. There's some of our language words. The one word that people get confused about the most, though, which I find hilarious, is the word port. Now, my publisher is based in Queensland, University of Queensland Press. I'm a Queenslander born and bred. None of us batted an eyelid when we were editing this, but everybody who's not a Queenslander gets really confused by the word port. Now, it's short for portmanteau, which I did not know until somebody told me. I think it was a librarian, actually. And it's essentially, which is, a word for a suitcase. But we use it in terms of our backpack, our school port. And we've got our port racks. And yeah, so considering all the other stuff I've got in there, I kind of love it and find it hilarious that port is the word that everybody gets confused about. But yeah, back to the YA thing. So why YA? I was really glad my publisher gave me the option. They said, it's up to you. We can do this as adult. We could do YA. I went away and I had a big conversation with, I'm lucky enough to know some YA writers. And I had a yarn with some of them and I had a yarn with some adult writers. And there were a few things that popped out at me, which was, I don't want to go into too much detail because some of it was a bit personal. I don't want to tell other people's stories. But I feel like the characters in the book lend themselves absolutely to YA, and this was always meant with, my nibblings in mind. I've always write for them. So I sort of said to my publisher, if you think the rest of the world will accept this as YA, then let's do YA. And it's really shocked me how open people are to it. Especially the number of school librarians I'm hearing from. That's the biggest, demographic, I guess you'd say, who are emailing me, wanting me to talk to their students, who are giving me direct feedback or asking me questions. And yeah, it's been really amazing. And I've had my mind blown about how accepting people have been of it. Because I really did think the mature content would people would not engage and would not accept, and that was, what it was. The thing was that I find most encouraging though too is how people are open now to that difference, whereas I don't think when I was a teenager people were open to that difference. So when I was in high school, I found out years later Melissa Lukashenko was publishing. She had YA titles, but nobody ever stopped that. Nobody ever talked about it to us. And that would have been like perfect for me as a teenager, because being able to see myself in something in a positive light, in something that was authentic and felt like I connected with, would have meant the world. And this is why I think I'm just blown away by how many Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders out there, writers who are challenging that and giving us that. And like that was also another big thing for me, was to argue back against this idea. Well, not argue back, but just demonstrate that we're not a problem and we're not all this, that deficit discourse stuff. It just drives me completely crazy. Because yes, we grew up poor. Yes, there was a lot of racism. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that went down that was really bad and should never have happened. And I'm not trying to belittle that, and we should absolutely talk about it. We should absolutely acknowledge it. But that's not all we are. Like I actually am very proud of my community. I love my family. People tell me that Ghostbird reads like a love letter to my community, which I'm stoked about. And, because it's us, it's who we are. And that was the main point of that whole thing. I tend to talk very fast when I'm nervous, so I feel like I've just blasted through a whole heap of information. Sorry, Sean is just saying, I think it's great that it's YA with the identity issues the teens are dealing with. Absolutely, and this own voices stuff is brilliant, and I'm so into it. I actually got to sit on a panel with Kay Kerr and Rawa Aja last year. Oh, we had so much fun, and it's just brilliant. And I'm really enjoying exploring other minorities and neurodiverse people and just reading about their experiences. It's been mind-boggling. Speaking of which, Amy asked me to talk to you guys about what I'm reading. I'm doing my PhD, so I'm not reading anything that anybody else would want to read. But I am slowly building a tower of to-be-read pile, and I promised myself when the PhD is done, I'm going to lie down somewhere for 2 months, and I'm just going to demolish my to-be-read pile. I've got 2 of them here. So top of that, Boy from the Mish from Gary Lansborough. Cannot wait to read that. I've got a couple of books by Rebecca Lim, Tiger Daughter. I'm hearing amazing things about that one. I've got, Asphyxia's Future Girl, Holden Shepherd's Invisible Boys, sorry, I can't read that font, and I'm probably going to say her name wrong, so I apologize. Wei Chim's Surprising Power of a Good Dumpling. But, like, in the past, people I've read in that YA Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander sphere, Jared Thomas, anything by Jared Thomas, brilliant. I already mentioned Melissa Lukashenko's books. I couldn't find my copies. It's on my to-be-read pile in a box now, thanks to the renovations. But Curly Saunders, can't wait to read her stuff. Anything by Magabala, really. Yeah, I've got some Alison Evans and Rawa's there. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can actually make that out though. The Theory of Hummingbirds. And that's just the YA stuff. So I'm a huge, like I said, spec fic fan. I've got my urban fantasies and my favorite writers there too, that they're all sitting there to be read, and I'm hoping that I'll have the chance after all said and done. So I don't know. I think I've talked so fast, Amy, and I apologize. I think I've just burned through all of what I had notes down on. I guess, is there any questions? I did. Yeah, sorry. Oh, pick them up and show us the cover. Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. So, Gary's book. If this doesn't sweep the awards, I do not know if there's any justice in the world. So Y's book. Yeah, I've got some Alison Tate's there too. I'm actually I've actually just signed a I've signed a contract for a middle grade fantasy novel with Hachette, and I'm really excited about it. Not just because it's really cool to be able to say that, but the book's actually for my 2 eldest nieces. And I started this writing process with them back when they were much younger, and they were just, they're 14 and 12 now, about to turn 15 and 13, which is terrifying. But when they were younger, you know, I was missing them like crazy. I also really wanted to help them with their literacy, because obviously books are a big thing in my house and we love books. But so I started off by writing a chapter, and it's a story about them, and they go off on this huge adventure, and I would send them the chapter and a letter, and then they'd have to reply with a letter and drawings, and they'd have to tell me what they thought was going to happen next. And then my idea was always to not give them what they thought was going to happen. So this is that book. It's temporarily called Washpool at the moment. Yeah, I'm super, super excited about it. So that's why I've got a lot of middle grade fantasy as well that I want to read. So Alison Tate, Amy Kaufman, of course, Alison Evans books, which I haven't had a chance to read any of her stuff, so I've actually gone and bought every last one. Lily Wilkinson, The Erasure Initiative. I actually know Lily, she's brilliant. I've worked with her, she's so cool. Rebecca Lim's Tiger Daughter. If you're into poetry, I am so excited to read that one. Evelyn Aralewin's Dropbear. Kelly Saunders also has that. Yeah, and I'll just show you these two as well. So Asphyxia's Future Girl and Holden Shepherd's Invisible Boys. This is the problem with getting shortlisted on things. I then want to go buy everyone else's book on the shortlist, and I think I literally have. And my partner's gone a little bit nuts. So somebody's asking questions. Post a pic. Yeah, I can do that later. I can send that to Amy. What am I studying for my PhD? So my PhD has evolved. Originally, it was going to be a community history, but it's sort of become, I'm so sorry, someone is knocking on my front door. I think it's a delivery. So when I was exploring this whole idea of the PhD and my culture, it just wasn't working. And now the PhD has kind of evolved into this argument back against the academy. So me as a Black creative female working in a very Eurocentric male academic environment, and why it doesn't work the way they want it to work. And I've just had I'm meeting with my supervisor tomorrow about my exegesis. So I'm mildly terrified, but his words are, and I hope, is it okay to swear, Amy? I do swear a lot. I'll err on the side of caution. He loves it, and you can imagine what word went before that. But now I'm terrified about what he's going to tell me. And the other part of that is a novel. So this will be hopefully my next one. It's a YA novel. It's going to explore the things that exactly what I was telling you guys about with my PhD. A young Aboriginal girl off community for the first time in this very male Eurocentric world, with no one in her community had ever done that before. So she's struggling to understand where her place is. And, you know, we all struggle to see our own culture. And so that's what she's run smack bang into. So she's very isolated. She's very alone. And then she finds her way into a self-help group that's supposed to be about support and how to be better communicators and, you know, do all that sort of nice stuff. But there's something really sinister going on underneath that. And she's going to have to find a way to save herself and other people. So I think I lost some, sorry guys, I'm just going to scroll to the top. There's my PhD. Oh, thank you, Becky, who just said that she loved Ghostbed. What are you doing PhD in? Literature related? Yes, of course. It actually is my PhD in creative writing. I don't know why I I think because I used to work in a publishing house, so I was in publishing for 7 years at Aboriginal Studies Press, working on academic and non-fiction Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander books, which I loved too much. It took over my life, and so I had to walk away because I was also letting it destroy my health, and it really hurt me. I loved my job, but it was really good. I moved into the PhD, and I think I had that head on of the non-fiction community history thing, and that's why it had to evolve the way that it did. But it's been really fun because I got to do so much archival and oral history research with former community members and archives, and I found all this treasure. And now the next process after the PhD will be finding a way to disseminate all that stuff with my community members and get permissions and protocols done. So that's going to be really complicated. Will you get a list of these suggestions on the wiki? Yeah, well, I'll send Amy that list. Any graphic novel, prose, YA titles you'd recommend? Abby and the Underdogs. I don't know if that's YA though. I think that's more middle grade. I'm a huge fan of Abby and the Underdogs. Anything by Dub Leffler. But again, like I think because I used to buy these and read them to my nibblings, you know, his Once There Was a Boy, where there's literally no words in it and it's all his illustrations. It was just, oh my God, I loved it. Oh, Trace Barler, Rock Hopping. Oh, again, I don't know if that counts as a graphic novel though. Yeah, I do need to get more into that, I think. Although my partner might kill me if I pick up another genre. Actually, I had a friend say to me the other day that my next project should be a graphic novel and I need to find an artist and come up with something. We'll see. I do have adult graphic novels though too. So because I'm a huge fan of, I'm a huge nerd. I love, you know, Firefly and, you know, Buffy and that sort of stuff. But yeah, finding them from that perspective of First Nations, Australian or any First Nations cultures is really difficult. The only comic I'm aware of for Abby and the Underdogs, absolutely. And I'm feeling really bad because I can't remember the name of the author. I've actually met him. He's a really beautiful guy. I will Google while I keep thinking. But yeah, I think people are actually starting to recognize that this representation needs to happen. Oh, come on. Should say the guy's name. I swear to you, I can't see his name. It only says, there we go. Brenton McKenna. How can I forget Brenton? But yeah, he's published through Mugabala as well. So Mugabala does some really amazing stuff. Go check it out. I actually did an internship with those ladies. They are, oh my God, for the size of their team, the stuff they come out with is amazing. Even just not even saying for the size of their team, what they come out with, I'm saying the workload they develop is amazing. But yeah, it's a problem for graphic novels, I think. What difference would it have made to you to have a book like Ghostbird available in your local library as a teenager? So much. You know, you get told enough by media, by school, by other social institutions that your culture is inferior, that you're the problem. You know, it just, of course, you're going to start listening, especially when it's happened over generations. I'm going to get upset. You know, so that all that representation was informing how people were behaving to me and my family and my community, and it was just so wrong. And what there was even worse. I mean, honestly, I would have just preferred that they not write about us at all if they were going to continue ignorance. Because I think, you know, literature has a lot to offer in terms of community change and social change, and I think we're seeing that, you know. You know, the Miles Franklin, for example, you can see it in our awards. the Miles Franklin traditionally was a very white male space. If you look at the judges, the winners, the shortlists, that's what it was. And as you go down the years, you can start to see that change. You know, women start winning it, and then people of color start winning it. You know, and it directly reflects, those awards directly reflect, I think, what's happening in our society. And I think I've come along at a really amazing time, and I'm benefiting from those processes that these authors have had to battle, these fights that they've had to battle. So in a lot of ways, I've been really lucky because of them. Do you feel like libraries in general are doing well in promoting own voices? Yeah, absolutely. If anything, if the librarians I'm talking to are anything to go by, absolutely. But at the same time, I think it depends on, as with anything, the person and the people within a library. And I think there's still a lot that needs to, a lot of work that needs to go on. Because, you know, like, you're still seeing some awards, and sometimes they do really great things, and then sometimes the next year it's a step back and you're like, why wasn't this on the list? Or, you know, and I'm sure you can say that for a lot of things, but when you start to look at ethnicity, culture, difference in those awards, I think you're seeing a gradual change, and that's a positive. I love your optimism, Lisa. You have so much contributing experiences. We'll definitely read this. But oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't think of myself as an optimist. I think of myself as a pessimist. I always plan for the worst, but I hope for the best. So I don't know what that is. Can you please talk a bit more about the permissions process? Sure. So this is something, as a publisher and an editor, I've spent a lot of time working with non-Indigenous people and trying to educate them about that permissions and protocols process. It is really complicated. So there's no way I can educate you guys even a tiny bit, but there's some really great resources out there. So there's the Australia Council of Writing Protocols. If you just Google that, it'll pop up. If you Google ethical publishing guidelines, my former employer, Aboriginal Studies Press, has ethical publishing guidelines that sort of lay it all out. And I was actually, for the first edition, I was one of the co-authors of that. So there's some really, really good stuff out there. Anything by Melissa Lukashenko, her opinion pieces are spot on. Oh, sorry, I've got to stop learning to do that symbol. You know, when a symbol meaning gets usurped and changed, it's really hard, but I'm not okay with it anymore. So what a lot of non-Indigenous people fail to understand is when we say permissions and protocols, we mean it for everybody. That is just a cultural difference at the very core. Now, there's keeping in mind that First Nations peoples are incredibly diverse. There are very few things that we share, but the permissions protocol process is one of them. So, you know, me is a perfect example. It's my culture, it's my spiritual beliefs, it's my community, but I still need to go back and get permissions and protocols. It's even more important for me because a non-Indigenous author can get permissions and protocols and walk away, but it's my family. If I get it wrong, I will never live that down. It's my head literally, my head literally on the chopping block. So it's always complicated. It's always long and difficult. And what I'll say to a lot of writers is you need to educate yourself about that and be prepared for that. Because, you know, I think about it in terms of myself, right? So I'm straight and cisgendered. My manuscript that's signed with Hachette has a gay character in it. I didn't mean to. I'm not a planner. I'm a pantser. I fly by the seat of my pants when I write. And I wrote, she just appeared and she had a girlfriend. And after I realized what I'd done, I burst into tears because I'm really sensitive about appropriating other people's stories. You never want to do that. So, you know, luckily I could work with a friend who's gay and one of my editors is queer. And so they were able to help me work through that in a way that made it appropriate and not appropriation. So it's always difficult to write about something that you are not, a minority especially, that you are not a member of. And unless you educate yourself about that minority, you will absolutely and inadvertently write in stereotypes and ignorance. And you will further that story within our society. And I think that is the worst thing any writer can do, in my opinion. But that's my morals. And I think Anita High says that all the time. It's down to your morals and what you're okay with. The permissions process comes back to that real big cultural difference between mainstream Australian culture. Most Western cultures, not all, but most Western cultures, they have this idea that knowledge should be free and easy to everybody, and the rights of the individual come before anybody else's. That's not the case with my culture. It's actually directly the opposite. Knowledge, and you'll see this in Ghostbird because it's what Tace deals with when talking to her grandfather and her grandmother and her elders. Knowledge has to be earned. You have to show that you're willing to listen, willing to learn, before they'll trust you with their knowledge. And it is a trust building exercise. So it is, you know, that idea that you have to earn that knowledge, but also the rights of the community come before the individual, which is why we have such a problem with copyright, which is all about the rights of the individual. So, you know, it's hard to explain something that's so instinctive to me in a lot of ways. And I think because of my background, I segue straight into representation in stories. So I don't know if I helped answer that question or if I just complicated things a bit too much. Yeah. Did I go off? Did I go off on a tangent? But look, this is how we yarn too. This is how blackfellas talk. You know, mainstream Australian culture is very linear. It's like, you know, here's point A, here's point B. You're going to go from point A to point B in a single straight line. Blackfellas, we yarn. Like, here's the point. And we talk all the way around it, and then we come back, and then there's a point that we're talking about. And that's actually a reflection, I think, of our worldview, which is very much that everything is connected. Everything is connected. Doesn't the permission process? Yes, 100% it makes it difficult. But if you're doing it appropriately and respectfully, it is a requirement. And this is what I'll say to non-Indigenous writers: just because it's not part of your culture does not mean it's okay when you're writing about somebody else's culture where it is required. But at the same time, this is why the first thing I say to writers: why are you doing this? Because if somebody's doing it for the wrong reasons, they won't want to invest the time and energy into doing it right and doing it appropriately. But if they're doing it for the right reasons, and there's a lot of writers out there who do want to do the right thing, and I'm happy and excited to help them do that. But yeah, they realize it takes a while. You know, like my permissions process, that was 6 weeks of sitting down, and still throughout the entire process of my master's and then getting edited and then getting published, I was constantly going back and getting family members to read it, because I needed them to be sure that I'd represented us properly. But, you know, cool. Any other questions, guys? I'll send those links to you, Amy. I'll make a note. Oh, thank you. Amy, I'll send you the links to the resources I mentioned for the writing protocols and the ethical publishing guidelines.
That would be very helpful. And the list of all of those books behind you. You can even just take a photo.
Yeah, I will do. You guys have no idea. I think I've got literally 4 boxes.
You find we do have an idea. We are the same bookish sort of people.
Oh, isn't that great? You just find your tribe.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, then I would just say thank you so much, Lisa. That was super enlightening and totally engaging. Yeah, it's there's so much for us to think about now. And I think one thing that I really appreciated was hearing about the personal importance of representation and own voices, that we need to have these things front and center so that everybody can feel that they are represented in their library, because our libraries are for all of us. I really loved Ghost Bird. I found it atmospheric and spooky, not super, super scary. Port did thoroughly bamboozle me for a few minutes. So I thought you might even be talking about a portal and that it was full on speculative until I worked out you just meant school bag. But I also really enjoyed all the cultural aspects. Learning about another culture through just a really ripping story was a really great way to do it. And I think you handled really well all of those permissions and cultural things, like when you couldn't name something specifically. I found that fascinating. So
that was really interesting for me too, because like I had permission to use the names, but I refused to do it because I think my experience in publishing has made me very wary about appropriation, if that's not already clear. So my mum actually asked me why I didn't use the names, and I just said, well, part of the reason was I do fictionalize. The thing that's at the very heart of the story, the darkness at the heart of the story, sorry, trying not to give spoilers, is very much a thing that we believe in, but I have tweaked it somewhat. And so to me, it is no longer that thing, but it is still, anybody in my community can read it and they can recognize it and they can understand, oh, that's where she's fictionalized. That's what she's talking about. Whereas a mainstream reader wouldn't be able to do that. And I don't want to confuse the issue. And I don't want to leave a mainstream reader thinking that that's what that thing is. It's a bit like when people ask me why it's okay in speculative fiction to use Christianity, for example, as the basis for like a really ripping urban fantasy story where you've got angels and demons, for example. The very big difference is you're using a mainstream religion that you may not be a part of that religion, but you do understand the basic tenets of that. You understand that somebody's taking something that a lot of people believe in, but they're fictionalizing elements of it. So you have that base understanding. Whereas if anybody writes anything, and that's non-Indigenous people or Indigenous people, and label it Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander belief systems, people believe it. They take it as absolutes, even if that person says clearly that it's fiction. And that to me is not okay, and that's not something that I want to perpetuate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And is very helpful for us who are struggling with all of those things. What is appropriation and making sure that we've got own voices and all those things. It's a balance, and it's really helpful to understand, why. If you can't do it for one thing, can you do it for others? That really makes sense. Thanks so much, Lisa. You may go and have your lunch now.
Heat my coffee up.
Yes, and everyone else will head off now and reserve their copy of Ghost Bird.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. And thanks for the great questions. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So for the rest of us, we're going to be heading into breakout rooms now. I'll start my video so you can see me. No, I can't. So Ellen's going to pop us all into breakout rooms where we'll have questions to talk about. And there's obviously lots to talk about after hearing Lisa's talk as well. So you don't have to do anything. You will just be put into a breakout room.
Sorry, I was so focused on listening to Lisa, I wasn't paying attention to breakout rooms. My apologies. Slightly dropped the ball on that one. But it won't be long.
So everyone, do feel free to unmute yourselves, put your videos back on so that you can participate fully in the discussion in your small group. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some really good discussion in your breakout rooms. Yeah, we did. We've got to remember that 60-second warning isn't totally 60 seconds, and we get a bit cut off at the end there. But yeah, that was really good. So we're now going to have a couple of presentations on readers advisory tools. And first up, we have Eric, who's going to be talking to us about Goodreads. Thanks, Eric.
Okay, so can you see me, I suppose? Share screen. Okay, so my name is Eric Dodson. I'm the information librarian at Lane Cove Library. So I'm an avid user of Goodreads as a tool for keeping track of my reading history and as a social tool. And many people will be familiar with the site as a platform to log your reading with a very personalized focus. I tend to do my own thing, but there are plenty of features and functions which are applicable to Reader's Advisory. So through this presentation, I will highlight some of the best features of Goodreads for the purposes of RA. And as a carryover from Angela Hirsch of Novelist's point yesterday, Goodreads does use the term recommendations, whereas I will use the more RA-friendly term suggestion. So the main points of usability I will discuss today regarding Goodreads are as a tool for, as a social media platform for making and interacting with friends and their reading habits, for keeping track of your books that you have read and that you want to read, utilizing the bookshelf functions for categorizing your reading in a variety of ways, to set reading challenges for yourself and with your friends to encourage reading, by rating and reviewing your reading, as well as taking advantage of community feedback, and by setting your favorite genres and tagging titles to allow Goodreads to suggest appropriate reads based on your tastes. And they also have an extensive section called Listopia, where you can vote on and create lists of favorite or suggested reading. So welcome to Goodreads. For anyone new to the site, it is a well-established and easy-to-use page. As you will see, it has a similar basis to other popular social media pages, with a general feed page which shows your recent activity, as well as that of your friends and accounts that you follow. Between your made page and your profile page, you can easily access all the site's functionality through widgets and links which sit on the sides and along the top of these core places. So joining and logging in is a simple process. It's easy to create an account just by providing an email and setting a password, but you can also sign in from some major social media platforms, including Facebook, Google, Amazon, or Apple accounts. And that's probably an easy way as well to bring your friends over, I suppose, without having to search them up separately. So adding friends in Goodreads is where the social element comes in. For readers' advisory purposes, it is good to bring in some diversity. So besides personal friends and colleagues, you may easily browse popular reviewers, author pages, and their followers, as well as friends of friends, and the friends lists of followers, which is people would probably be familiar with from other platforms. And I've found that adding some users with a strong presence on Goodreads can dominate your feed a bit, as it will bring in their likes and reviews and comments to your activity feed. I have some colleagues who are strong romance readers, which is not my forte, so having a staff connection on Goodreads can be an easy way to tap their suggested reading for RA if they're not in the office, or if you get the question on something that you know is their field of interest. Having a variety of friends is very helpful in terms of readers' advisory. I have a number of friends who are very specific in their reading habits. One reads a lot of classic comics, and another guy reads a lot of fantasy, but even especially Warhammer, like relating to tabletop gaming. So even with very niche interests, they might not come around too often, but it's good to have that connection. And tapping into the reading habits of your staff, or even local book groups, library friends, or regular patrons could all help to create an interesting and diverse source of RA suggestions. So you may search Goodreads by member name or email for people you know to invite to be friends, or otherwise you can copy and send a Goodreads link for them to connect with you. Once you have some friends, you can browse their friends list to look for people you know or people who have similar interests. And connecting with friends through Facebook is an easy option, but I generally don't cross the streams with my social medias, as I don't want to bombard everyone with my obsessive reading. And as you review books and build Goodreads presence, people may follow you as on other social media platforms if they see a common interest. So to get started or to explore like-minded readers, you can search a favorite author. Some authors will simply have an information page with their books and related info brought in by Goodreads and fans. But authors may choose to be a Goodreads author, so they have a verified and more official presence on the site. And you can follow either of these page types, and through here you can see other people who follow favorite authors, and you can also check out what other people are reading and either add them as a friend or follow their reviews. And some authors are interactive on Goodreads and will answer questions and write blog posts. And especially when an author has a new book coming out, they may promote their works through there and sometimes hold giveaways. So that's sort of an incentive to follow your favorites. So a great way to get a feel for what you and your friends have in common, and just as importantly for Reader's Advisory, what books you have disagreed upon in terms of rating, is to use the compare books function in Goodreads. Using this function, you can see the books you have read in common as well as not in common, and you get a percentage of taste-based similarity based on the books you have both read, and can easily compare the books your ratings agree and disagree upon. And there are some more in-depth analysis tools which you can go crazy with, but they might get a bit more beyond helpful, I think. I would say browsing the not in common reading list of friends could be the most value to explore what friends have read outside your comfort zone, and following their ratings to possibly find some great suggested reads, especially like outside of what you would usually look for. So the shelving system in Goodreads is a great way to organize your reading and facilitate Reader's Advisory. All users have 3 exclusive shelves, which are read, currently reading, and to read, which a title may only appear on one of at any time. Other than that, the options for shelving are unlimited in terms of title and scope. Shelves may be modified to be sortable or to allow Goodreads to recommend books based on their content. I use shelves to separate books I read a physical copy of and those I listened to on audiobook, especially as RA for audiobooks brings in other considerations such as single or multiple narrators or even cast recordings. And you have to think of those elements such as like accent and voice. That's handy to think of if people are asking for a specific format advisory. And also using shelves for award winners is helpful. People looking for Australian literature might like to try like a Miles Franklin award winner or nominee, which has a good representation of titles over the years, or for genre-specific awards such as the Hugo or Nebula for sci-fi fantasy books, or the Bram Stoker Award for horror. But I mean, just with the Bram Stoker Award, I was going to point out it is a bit dominated by Stephen King and a couple of other names. So that can be a bit of a problem. So you can be as broad or specific as you like, but I like to have shelves for young adult graphic novels and some of the bigger literary awards and genres I read more heavily in. But it can also be a good way to make you think about diversifying your reading when you see less favored genre shelf languishing with a low score. You can feature a shelf so it appears at the top of your profile page, or Goodreads will display a random selection of your 5-star ratings. Some people like to have a did not finish or a gave up on shelf, which is probably akin to a 1-star rating. And yeah, you can delve into everyone's ratings as deeply as you like, and it can be sometimes helpful. So the want to read shelf seems to me like an option that is guaranteed to get out of control, but I know it is very popular. Obviously a great way to remember and keep track of all the books you want to read instead of having them stacked next to your bed. I personally try to keep the want to read shelf restricted to a few that are high on my wish list or are difficult to source. In terms of RA, browsing a friend's want to read shelf could help to find some suggestions of worthy classics, upcoming or pre-publication titles, or titles of special interest. This all depends on the reader, obviously, as I have friends that have extensive want to read lists, but by using the sorting option to rank their titles by rating, I can get an interesting list of suggestions cross-referenced, like between my friend's taste and the Goodreads community of ratings. And you could explore through the title or author links. There are often helpful tags with each book's information of awards they have won for being nominated for, as well as genre links and reader also enjoyed suggestions, which appear on each page. To have a goal or possibly stress yourself out, you may set a reading challenge for the year with a target total of books to read. You can simply set the number of books to read towards, and your challenge will be updated as you progress. And it's good if you've got some competitive reading friends, and it'll always remind you if you're lagging in your application. So at the core of Goodreads is the rating and review system. So when you finish a title, you're able to give the book a star review between 1 and 5 stars, and you can also give a written review if you like. And there's no half stars, but the reviews are calculated as an aggregate. So it'll come up, as you can see on the screen, with like a 4.08 average. And when browsing Goodreads, you can easily see a book's overall star rating and how many ratings the review is based upon by hovering over the cover image, as on the slide. And some reviews tend to focus on giving a précis of the story, and other people will go into more in-depth analysis of the writing. And as with all social media, you have to decide how you use these reviews. A general community overview is the best way, I find, I suppose, to not go too far into everyone's separate analysis. So once you're finished reading a book, you then move into you can move it to the core red shelf, and you have the option to add it to any of your other shelves which are relevant. In writing a review, you can write a little or a lot, although I peruse the review section, I'm amazed at how much, when I look through the reviews, some people will write a lot, but I prefer to just move on to the next read. Some people review to give themselves a future reference, and some write a central review for use in other platforms, but I generally stick to a pretty simple good or bad piece about the feeling, and I don't go too much into detail on the plot of the story so much. So when you rate a title with a 4 or 5 star review, you will have the opportunity to suggest the book to people on your friends list, and you can see what the suggestion was based on, like in terms of crossover with genres that they're interested in. And if you don't do it at that time, you can always come back, and there's a recommend button if you remember someone who might also be interested. And if you have a close relationship with book groups or regulars at your library that may be friends on your Goodreads, this could be a good way to pass on staff suggestions. And Goodreads provides recommendations based on the content of various shelves in your library, and the front page offers suggestions based on current year reading. And when you view all recommendations, you get a suggested reading for each of your shelves. As is suggested on Goodreads, the more you rate books you have read and specify your favorite genres and create shelves, the more tailored the suggestions will be. On the recommendations page, there is also a not interested option, which will help Goodreads to narrow down suggested suggestions according to your reading taste. And when you hover over each suggestion, you can see which books from your reading list the suggestion is based on. Some of the broader connections Goodreads can make can be very interesting, because I have a lot on my World War II non-fiction shelf, and it sometimes brings in memoirs or fiction or books that deal with broader aspects of people's experience post-war. And Yeah, so that's a good example of using Goodreads to garner suggestions relating to a genre or area of interest, but gain some diversity in your reading options. In the Explore Books section, you're able to set your favorite genres from a list of tick boxes. And there's a bunch of suggestions in there, like new releases, most read, related lists, and new releases by author you have read. You can also use related genres links to drill down further into the subgenres to get more specific. And as with this one for horror, you can see the subcategories that come in, including zombies, gothic, Lovecraftian, and bizarro. The list page on Goodreads, as they call it, Listopia, can be a bit of a can of worms, but there are plenty of lists to delve into. There's easy links to featured lists and best of lists. Like I've created lists and got good input quickly from other people on Goodreads, so that's a good way to go. And you can also get best of lists by month, year, decade, century, and best ever. There's the Reader's Choice Award for each year that comes around, and you can always view the nominees and the winners for that, and that could be a good option, especially maybe for book groups, to get quite a contemporary referral. And yeah, for groups, we sort of have a group at Lane Cove Library, which I've been trying to push more, but that can be a good way to set up lists that you could get staff to add books to and then easily reference through either the app or the website for sharing Goodreads as a group resource. And you can also run polls and things to get people participating. I'm just trying to get that going here at Lane Cove a bit more. And that's about it for this run through of Goodreads. So thanks for listening, and I hope you have fun exploring the platform and making the most of it for your Reader's Advisory activities.
Thanks, Eric. That was really helpful. I am a big user of Goodreads, but even I learnt things then, and there are definitely ways I could use it more for RA. So we are sharing in the chat at the moment the email addresses that we use for our Goodreads account. So if you are keen to connect with other New South Wales Public Library staff on Goodreads, then if you just pop your email address into the chat, we'll be able to connect with each other. So a few of us already have ours up there. So our next tool that we're going to be looking at is Storygraph, and Penelope from Sutherland is going to share that with us. Penelope, are you here? There you are.
Yes, we are. Okay, wait a sec. Oh, no, that's not it. We won't be a second till we won't be a second.
We won't be a second. We're just having a little bit of a hiccup. Here we are.
Just bear with me. Share screen. That's what we want.
To get the,
we don't want to share that though. We tell her we won't be a second.
won't be a second.
We had it ready, and then of course something went wrong.
It wouldn't be an online session if we did not have some dramas. So thank you for
Yes, so thank you very much. Thank you for understanding.
Okay. See if we can get in. Sorry, Penny.
That's all right.
It's okay. I need to change that.
The slide share.
From beginning. Oh, we need to change the display. Just bear with me one more second. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much for your patience. So good afternoon. My name is Penny Hughes and I work for Sutherland Shire Libraries. I'm a branch librarian and I'm always being asked by my patrons for reading suggestions, as we all are. But more often than not, they ask me how can they track their reading history. So I came across the Storygraph last year when it was in its beta, its early development stage. And I've only been using it for a short period of time and I'm not experienced or with some of the features that they offer yet. But that said, what I've seen I like, and I believe that Storygraph could be an answer to many of my patrons' needs. So having a system for tracking books that you read is helpful on many levels. It can be a lot of fun, can help you focus on reading more. It can record your reading history, and it can set reading goals. The Storygraph has many of the same features as the other reading trackers, but also a few interesting features that current book websites lack. In Storygraph, you can explore your recommendations, your TRP, what you're currently reading, and more. But where the Storygraph stands alone is the intuitive way in which the site sorts its recommendations. The Storygraph discovers books by mood. If you're in the mood to read something adventurous or funny or fast-paced, darker, slower, more emotional, or perhaps a combination of a few, whatever the mood you're in for, if you mix and match the comprehensive set of filter options provided, the Storygraph will find a book just right for you. So who's behind Storygraph? It's run and built by Nadia Ondaneo and her friend, the co-author, Rob Freelo. Nadia didn't just appear out of the blue. She has an impressive resume. She graduated from University College, Oxford, and she's had a great deal of experience in the tech world. So Storygraph started life in 2019 as Nadia's personal side project to create and track progress through reading lists, and Nadia was inspired by her own frustrations with Goodreads. She spent months speaking to and researching readers, including Goodreads users, bloggers and friends, to find out what was missing. And she worked to find specific areas that readers felt Goodreads didn't offer before starting the progress of building something to meet these needs. This reading tracker is a very intuitive tool to use. The features are continually evolving, and I'm just going to show you some aspects of the site that I've discovered that I particularly like. So smart personalised recommendations. It's the main feature that the site prides itself on. And that's the ordered for you algorithm and the AI processor. How this works is by filling out the number of questions in a survey as part of the signing up process. You'll be asked what are your favourite and least favourite genres, tropes, moods and pacing styles. This tells the Storygraph team what style of reading you really like, and they'll use these answers or preferences to recommend books to base their customised algorithm on. Note, you can return to these answers and adjust them at any time. So getting started with Storygraph. It's super easy and it's free to sign up, and the instructions for the process are very clear. You sign up with your email, you choose your username, complete their survey to tune your reading recommendations. You import your Goodreads data into the Storygraph, which is an option. You can also populate your Storygraph from your public library reading history list and, of course, the books you already own. Building your own Storygraph. When the Storygraph reading preference, you're given high-quality personal book recommendations. So the survey is an integral part of the initial signing up process. So on the first page, there are two simple questions, both of which are multiple choices. The first question shows you a variety of different genres you can choose from, and there's some very specific options. The second question, you're fine-tuning your options by highlighting characteristics that you see, and that you can select up to 3 in that area. The next questions, it's really what you don't want to include in your reading experience, the genres you don't like, and the characteristics that most turn you off a book. This illustrates just how specific the survey tool is to determine your own personal reading profile. So importing books. Now it's time to populate your bookshelves. So in the next section, we show you how. Importing your Goodreads data. You just need to follow the prompts and voila, your Goodreads data is now in Storygraph. And after that's been successful, you'll receive an email once the import's complete. So importing a book yourself into this Storygraph is really easy. You can type in book details, title and author, and the site finds and imports the book for you, complete with the description and the cover image. The results remarkably quick and accurate. However, if for some reason it doesn't work, you can use the ISBN to import titles and even manually add books that don't have an ISBN. As this shows you. So exploring Storygraph. As you enter the homepage, you'll find recommendations based upon that you've previously enjoyed. Your current reading progress, what's in your TRP. The books are nicely presented and are easy to navigate to where you want to go next. That's if you're not distracted like I am all the time exploring my recommendations. So let's go work across the navigation bar at the top from left to right. Find a book is where the Storygraph is starting to think outside the box and has some really fun and exciting new features. A Find a Book is the list of books currently on your Storygraph that you can order in several different ways to locate a title. Although the search function was initially a problem for the Storygraph team, the functionality is now much more intuitive, especially when regards to punctuation, accents, and misspellings. Exact matches are always listed at the top of the search results. You can also track progress, which is a unique feature of this website. So reading challenges. The Storygraph has its own original challenge as well as generic yearly challenges that are similar to Goodreads Reading Goal. Aside from these, the sites also host a variety of reading challenges from all over the internet, and you can sign up for one of the onboarding challenges or search for one using keywords. One of the reasons to use a reading tracker is to be able to set reading goals and challenges. There's a reading challenge directory. You can see at the top the 3 challenges for Storygraph. And if you don't want to participate in either of these 3, you can search for a reading challenge, either by title or host, or by the 12 different categories you can see here. To create a new challenge or filtered challenges, I've chosen to join the Reading Trivial Pursuit Challenge. And your Reading Challenges dashboard appears on your home screen, so you can always be checking it out. Adding a new reading challenge. It's simple to add it yourself, and the steps are laid out on the following slides. The Storygraph updates your progress in the challenge automatically as you change your books from unread to read. Scrolling down a bit, you'll find your challenge prompts. Community. The next link takes you into the community section of the Storygraph. It should be noted that during the development, the Storygraph team made an important decision. It would not be a social media website in the way that users will recognise Goodreads. In January 2021, the Storygraph team were quoted as saying, "We purposefully don't show you who is following you. We're aiming to avoid certain social media pressures of following people back, follow accounts, notifications, etc." Nadia has stated that these decisions mean that Storygraph remains an extremely safe space. I think that's quite important. So community reviews. The website isn't completely devoid of social interaction. Users can create and review each other's reviews. You can see what other users are adding to their reading lists with the ability to like their updates. When it comes to browsing community ratings and reviews, the system is set up quite similarly to Goodreads. However, one significant difference is that you can switch between seeing updates from people you follow and all on Storygraph. So it's people you follow and also everyone. Rating and reviewing. Of course, rating and reviewing is a big part of Storygraph. The main difference between the Goodreads system and the one we find in Storygraph is the quick survey the latter asks you to complete. The Storygraph asks all readers the same general questions about every book, and the answers create the blurb shown for each book, including the pace of the book and some adjectives describing it. With rating, when it comes to rating, the Storygraph thankfully allows quarter-star ratings, meaning that your ratings can get really specific. Instead of having to choose between 3 and 4 stars, you can actually rate your next book as 3.25, etc. So since the last few Storygraph updates, you can now add trigger content warnings to your review. I believe that book content warnings are absolutely necessary. I'm grateful for this, that it's something that the creators have actually thought about. I'm also impressed by the scope of the content warning section. They can be split into graphic, moderate, and minor.
Sorry.
Okay, this is my review. And this is how it appears on the actual website. This is the one I've written. So your story graph, one of the most important pages is your story graph. Clicking on this link takes you to a snapshot of the reading habits, your current reading and recent reading, and also offers you many different rabbit holes to explore. As well as your TRP, you will find access to your reading preferences and statistics. So there's a yearly reading goals as well. It looks and works as you expected it to, resembling the Goodreads reading challenge. This is where you can set yourself up your personal goals for reading in certain number of books per year or series. Bookshelves. So the first bookshelf is your current reads. Here you can track progress. Other bookshelf options are read, to read, did not finish, and remove. If you mark your books do not finish, you can actually have an option to add an explanation of why you did not finish. Next one, reading preferences. So, reading preferences. This slide shows you the preferences are determined by analysis of the books that you've already read. You can improve your recommendations via your preferences. Your reading preferences can edit your answers at any time. You can modify your reading preferences. It's quick and easy to follow. The process of the program leads you through it very simply. And your new recommendations are instantly updated. You can discover books by mood, which is what the site's all about. This function shows just how intuitive but tailored to the individual the story graph is. Just mix and match the comprehensive set of filter options to find a book just right for your current mood. As you can see, the selection categories are mood, type, genre, pace, pages. Now you can exclude or include the books you already own or are ready to read. Sorting your bookshelves. You can sort your bookshelves in different ways to suit yourself, chronologically, all time, with that drop-down tab, or you can filter books by all time, 2021, or no date. Books you own. It's honestly so much easier to have these books in a separate shelf than to filter them by owned, which is only an option on the site. It's quite satisfying that the shelf has its own little profile section as well. So you can search your books marked as owned. Reading stats. If you love looking at reading stats, you'll be happy to know that Storygraph provides similar stats to Goodreads, but with an additional graphs that satisfy all of your aesthetic needs. The detailed breakdown of your reading stats is updated after each book you read. There are many stats that are available to analyse. Too many for me to talk about at the moment, so I'm just going to show you examples of what they provide. Lots of different breakdowns. And when you do read a book, you can go in and see how they've changed. So does the Storygraph have an app? Yes, it's what is called a progressive web app. It's not a standard bookmark. You install it via your mobile browser and it looks and behaves just like an app. It will open in a new window each time. It's compatible with Android and Apple operating systems or alternative devices. The Storygraph logo is the icon, and when you open it, it is in its own full screen standalone window. Is the Storygraph free to use? It is, and the bulk of the site will always be free to use. But there's now a version that you can pay for, Storygraph Plus, which is for the users looking for a more enhanced personalised experience. As you can see, the cost of it yearly and monthly. I've actually signed up for this because I think it's well worth the money. So what's new? Since my research began, there's been many amendments and improvements because the site is always evolving. The public roadmap is the brand new feature, and it's an opportunity for users to actually contribute to the future of Storygraph. You can add feedback about features or bugs, requests and ideas. And in addition, you can change additional languages in your preference. You can add them. And this is an example of some of the feedback. Yep. So as a conclusion, I'd just like to say that every reading tracker has its pros and cons. There are lots of tools that are similar with some that are far better. Tasks such as filtering and sorting my book lists, tracking reading stats, tracking reading challenges, and finding specific recommendations are all the key reasons why I like the Storygraph. The makers of the Storygraph are genuinely thought their site through from start to finish. I don't often participate in the social side of Goodreads anymore, so it hasn't bothered me too much that Storygraph doesn't have the social media aspect. Two things I particularly appreciate is the Storygraph popularity has actually pushed Amazon to update Goodreads for the first time in almost a decade. Secondly, the communication that the Storygraph team has with its audience is incredible, as well as constant updates on their Twitter feeds, including actually responding to their user comments. They also have a newsletter where they can keep up to date with new developments, and you can also follow them on Facebook and Instagram. So as a public library librarian, I can see why my patrons would be attracted to Storygraph. Check it out.
Thanks so much, Penny. That was really interesting because I have not seen Storygraph before, so I will go and check that out.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thank you so much for presenting. So we are actually going to mix up the agenda this afternoon a little bit, and we'll have our discussion groups now. So Ellen will pop us all in breakout rooms, and then after that we will go to afternoon tea. So don't forget that if you want to connect with people on Goodreads, they have been putting their email addresses in the chat, so you can copy those and then pop them into Goodreads to add those people as friends. And then, yeah, in a minute, Ellen will put us into our breakout rooms. So we are now moving on to 3 people, 5 books. And our first lot of 5 books will be Maria Savidis from Public Library Services, going to be talking about 5 titles by culturally and linguistically diverse writers. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Good. So here we go. So I'm also going to be sharing a bit of biographical information on the authors because I think it's really interesting how it informs the stories and what they're talking about. We're going to start with Antoni Libera, who was born in 1949 in Warsaw. He's a writer, translator, literary critic, theatre director. He's best known for translating Samuel Beckett's dramatic works into Polish, as well as Shakespeare, Sophocles, Oscar Wilde, and some opera librettos thrown in for good measure. I'm telling you this because the novel really reflects the author's classical, literary and theatrical background. The adult narrator looks back at his very precocious, funny, often arrogant and cosmopolitan senior high school self, who was prone to over-the-top use of language and reciting lines of plays. It's presented as a coming of age for the Polish intelligentsia, set against a backdrop of grim 1960s Stalinist Warsaw. Now that might sound really heavy, but it's actually written in such a lively and entertaining way. And I know the main trope is the protagonist becoming absolutely besotted with his French teacher, but really for me, it was about falling in love with the arts. And there are many, many references to and discussions about European art, classical music, jazz music, theatre, history, and more. And it really does get you nostalgic for the time when you yourself were also trying to figure out who you were and what defined you, or when you first discovered your favourite music or authors or started learning about art and culture. My next title is Perang by Omar Musa, and this is a collection of poetry. Omar is a Malaysian Australian author, poet and rapper, born in 1983 from Queanbeyan in New South Wales. Perang means machete in Malay, and this collection deals with his Malaysian heritage, migration and loss in a series of short to medium length prose poems. Many poems are very, very short narratives and brief flashes of imagery or a moment or a quiet observation or a memory. There are lots of line breaks and plenty of room that really give the words and individual poems their own spaces on the page. The language is quite straightforward and very easy to understand. It's only when you get to the third section where you really notice Omar's conscious hip hop influence appearing in his use of language with more rhymes and slang and cultural references. Interestingly, the author has also included a pretty decent glossary at the end, clearly explaining the Malay terms he's used and many of the cultural references and people that he names throughout. This is someone who really wants you to understand what he's trying to get across with his poetry. I absolutely breezed through this from start to finish in one sitting, and I'm really looking forward to reading his first novel, Here Come the Dogs, which was actually published around the same time as this collection. The Gentle Order of Girls and Boys by Dao Strom. She is a writer and musician born in 1973 in Ho Chi Minh and grew up in California. So this collection is four loosely linked short stories about young Vietnamese women in their 20s and 30s living in California and Texas. It feels like the stories take place in the very late 90s or very early 2000s, judging by the cultural references and technology or lack of technology. The book is informed by Vietnamese immigrations of the 1970s and filled with social observation of contemporary middle-class culture, suburban, urban and college life, and references to film and indie music and more. I really enjoyed the character studies and their reflections on how others viewed or tried to understand them, including other children of the diaspora attempting to fit into American society with varying degrees of success. These women compare themselves a lot to others in an effort to figure out their place or new identities in America. I wasn't sure at first about one of the main ways these women tended to see or understand themselves, which is mostly through their interactions and relationships with men. But often we see unemotional, unaffected acknowledging of the role of Orientalism in their perceived appeal, otherness, and mystique to American men and foreigners. But these women have agency and consciously choose to play up to stereotypes or not, depending on when and how it suits them. The Scapegoat by Sophia Nicolaedo. Sophia was born in Thessaloniki in Greece in 1968, and this novel has been translated into English. Its appeal to me initially was that it was a modern story set in Thessaloniki. This is a city I love and I have family who live there. It's a city with a very big history dating back to classical times, and the characters all have their own interactions with it as it becomes another character. We see it not only in the current day, but in the 1940s, the 70s, and even earlier in the 20th century at another time of great political and historical upheaval during the population exchange with Turkey. I thought it was going to be a straightforward crime story, but it's way more than that. It questions ideas of truth, justice, corruption, the cyclical nature of history, and sacrifice. It has multiple viewpoints across decades, at least half a dozen different narrators of different ages, genders, backgrounds, and throughout the different time periods. But it is very easy to keep track of who is narrating and what time period or what subplot their part relates to. This is something I've really struggled with in other novels, but I feel like it's done really, really well in this instance. Helen Habila is a Nigerian novelist and poet. He was born in 1967. He was a lecturer and journo in Nigeria before moving to England, and he now lives and teaches in the US. And this is his first novel that is set outside of Nigeria. So the novel's divided into 6 distinct sections, but I think it can alternatively be read almost as a collection of novellas. The common thread is the experience of African refugees in Europe. The characters take you to Berlin, London, Malawi, Somalia, Switzerland, Libya, Bulgaria, Italy, in urban apartment blocks, immigration offices, refugee camps, on rusty and dangerously overcrowded old fishing boats in the Mediterranean, and everything in between. It's incredibly evocative and empathetic towards the characters and their many different situations. At times you feel like you're following alongside them in a documentary. The stories explore the practical ramifications of being a refugee, but also inner dialogues processing the various reasons why people leave and try to make another life outside their countries. Again, the word for me for this collection is empathy. It's a very sensitive and contemporary exploration of the refugee experience. Obviously, owing to the subject matter, some parts and descriptions can be quite upsetting. There is a lot of death and trauma, oppression, racism, and people's lives are in danger. But there is also levity, warmth, poetry, and real humanity. This would be great for anyone minimum year 10 high school, I think, interested in learning more about the refugee experience, the political environment and fraught relationship between Africa and Europe, particularly now with the ongoing refugee crisis. I'll pop a link to my Indie Reads list in the chat, but all of these titles and more are available to borrow on Indie Reads, and that is it from me. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Maria? She is happy to at least try to answer them. You can pop them in the chat. And in the meantime, Ellen might get the video ready for Eliza's talk about LGBTIQ+ writers. Well, if there are no questions, thank you very much, Maria. I did write down each of those to go on my TBR. Excellent. And then you can see the Indie Reads list has been shared. Maria has shared that for us. Okay, Ellen, we are ready for the next one, which is being presented by video.
And please let me know if it's not coming through.
Will do.
Hi folks, I'm Eliza from Stanton Library. I would like to start by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Gamma-Eagle people of the Euphoria Nation on whose land I am on today. So today I'm going to be talking about LGBTQIA plus fiction, or queer fiction, just to make that a little bit less of a mouthful for everyone. So I might be doing some junior, some graphic novels, mostly young adult because I mostly read young adult fiction, and maybe an adult one if you're lucky. So today I'm going to start with an author because I couldn't narrow it down to one of their books. So first off, I want to start with Kay O'Neill. So their name is Kay O'Neill. They're currently published under Katie O'Neill, but their preferred name is Kay. So I'm going to start with them. So they've done the Tea Dragon Festival, Tea Dragon Society, and Princess Ever After. So I haven't brought them all along today, firstly because they were on loan, so I couldn't snaggle them all. And I can't narrow down which one is my favorite, but I thought I'd just talk about them as a whole and their books as a whole, because they have a lot of themes in common, and a lot of them is just, all this stuff is really gentle, warm fantasies. They're like super inclusive. They focus on characters learning about themselves, their strengths, finding their place in their world and like what's going on around them. They also have like a lot of environmental themes. They also have like people of different sizes, diverse abilities. It's kind of like being hugged by a basket full of kittens. Like, it's wholesome, super wholesome. But also there are dragons. They're just really warm-hearted fantasies that I think have been really created to try and inspire kindness, like self-acceptance and social responsibility in kids. So these ones are kind of aimed or targeted at, I'd say like 7 or 8 plus or 9 plus, but I feel like they're really all ages and beautiful. Also, sorry, I might not have mentioned, they're all comic books. So if you've never read a comic book or a graphic novel before, this is a great, gentle way to start. And let me just get you in there. The illustrations are really beautiful. So the art style on this one are just really bright, sweet, animated kind of style. But yeah, I really love Kay. Like, all their stuff is amazing. These are some of my favorite ones, but they have just so much different type of representation. What I really love as well is that like sometimes they have stories that focus on queer characters, like Princess Ever After, which is directly focused on love between two girls. But then they also just background characters where it's just, you know, queer representation, which is really lovely and nice. Non-binary characters, they're just in there living their life. Also, you know, people with different ability, diverse people. There's, oh, which one is it? Oh, I have it here, hold on a sec. Sorry, I got excited. So the Tea Dragon Festival, I thought this was really cool. The only sad thing is, so one of the major characters in this is actually deaf. So throughout the book they use sign language. Sadly, it's American Sign Language, not Auslan, but I still thought it was really cool that it was incorporated in the book. Cool. So I'm gonna move on, but yeah, they're one of my faves. So if you've never read a comic book, start here. Okay, next we're going to go for, let's go for this one. So this one is a classic. This one is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sayers. So this one is an old one, but it's a goodie. This one's been a favourite, a lot of the staff members here. So this one's a young adult fiction novel. So a lot of the themes of this one, it's like a coming of age story set in the 1980s. It's beautifully written, and I generally don't even notice that half the time, which is bad of me, but like it flows really well. It's kind of lyrical, it's poetic. The author himself actually does do poetry, so that would make sense why it's so pretty. But yeah, I really do love this one. Beyond it being beautifully written, it kind of focuses really on identity and journey. So if you love things that are coming of character, like character driven, this is for you. Like, it's super focused in Ari and Dante, how their relationship develops and their sense of identity. And this is about their sexuality, but also their culture, because they have a Mexican-American culture. And what I thought was really interesting is like the theme of like being comfortable in your own skin, discovering who you are. And also, I suppose I connected with it too, because they both have Mexican-American cultures, but it's that thing of like sometimes feeling disconnected from that and feeling disconnected for your sense of identity and what that means. And I could relate to that on a personal level, also just having an Italian background. And like, what does culture mean to you? What does all that thing kind of tie into? But it's really a book about strong characters. It's angsty, so if you love a bit of angst, but it's also beautiful. It's got beautiful moments, it's got romance, it's got friendship. It's got a lot happening for it. But yeah, if you're into words, I'd say this one is one for you. I think that it's really so strong as well though, because I think the author shares a lot of his own culture and like journey in his life in this book as well, and you feel that. I'm going to quickly go on before I'm taking too much time up, but yes, young adult, give it a go. Next, we'll go to another graphic novel. Okay, so this one is On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. Okay, so this is another graphic novel. Can you see that? Okay, cool. So this one, I'd like to just say space lesbians, and that would be the end that I put it down. But space lesbians, but also this is like a space opera. It's kind of space opera, but it's also got kind of like a memoir feel to it. So if you it's an interesting one just because it's got a lot of different elements. Like it's got coming of age, it's got space travel. Like it starts off with somewhere in the future, someone in space, like going around fixing up old relics on joining a space crew. But also, it's got a lot of intrigue because you're switching between two different timelines. So you're like, what's happening? There's also romance because obviously, once again, space lesbians. But it's got a lot going on for it. It's kind of like a space opera with like found family as well, because it focuses on these relationships. It's also the mystery of what's actually happening though, because you kind of meander through kind of slow and relaxed, but then the pace changes and you're kind of learning about this backward and forward relationship, so keeps you intrigued with that. There's also some adventure, so sometimes I think it kind of tricks you by looking like one thing, like it seems really calm for a little bit, then pow. It's got also really nice illustration styles. I usually like really bright and cartoony, but these ones are more kind of, Tilly Walden uses a lot more of like dark colours than bright colours. Oh, there you go, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, better? Yeah. So bright colours and dark colours. And if you haven't read a graphic novel before as well, this is also like a really clear one to read because the panels aren't confusing. And I know for some people when they first start reading graphic novels, the panels are confusing, but these are pretty straightforward. Yeah. This one's also much more like a young adult one, age-wise. But yeah, like space, you like coming of age, you like romance, you like a bit of mystery, you like something that's a little bit, thought-provoking. And found family, give this one a go. Okay, let me pop that one down. What do we have next? We have, let's go back to young adult fiction. Okay. Oh, and this is by an Australian author. Yay, okay. So this one is Euphoria Kids by Alison Evans. So this one is for magical fans. So this one is about friendship and family, finding yourself, coming of age, a sense of identity, its own voices as well. Like the author draws a lot from their own experiences of being non-binary and bi. What I really loved about this one is that it's a strain, which is always a bonus, but it's a really beautiful tale of these three queer kids that really are just exploring and discovering who they are, but it's wholesome, it's nice. Like sometimes in young adult fiction stuff, previously in the past, like especially with trans, any kind of trans issues, it was always like super angsty and just, which, reflects life, I understand. But this is like a book you want to read to be like, you know what? Life is better, life can go okay. And I think Alison Evans really wanted to do that, wanted to share their experiences, be like, you know what? It's gender euphoria, not gender dysphoria. So I really thought this was sweet. But yeah, it's got magical elements as well. If you like Studio Ghibli films, it's got that sweet kind of beautiful kind of fantasy element to it as well. Also a little bit like Francesca Lia Block, if you're into that. Oh, and I was just going to share kind of some of my favourite lines just because I really think it kind of gets the point across this like sense of friendship and identity and kind of what's happening. Okay, here we go. Here's a boy, not sure of his name or what he is made of. Iris grew from a seed under moss, brimming with new magic. And me, a fiery, fierce mess of a girl, crackling when I walk. I forged my own name. I'm invisible sometimes, but I know who I am. He just needs time. I hope he knows that. Yeah, cool. I'm gonna wrap it up because I'm running out of time, but we'll swish one adult fiction in there quickly. Where we go? Okay. Song of Achilles, adult fiction. So be fast with this one. So Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. It's kind of a retelling of the Iliad. So if you like ancient Greece history, this is for you. It follows the journey of our boys, Patroclus and Achilles. It's from the point of view of Patroclus. It's very, style-wise, the writing is beautiful. Once again, I'm not always massively into it, but the words are descriptive, it's poetic. You kind of get trapped in the world. Like, I really felt every moment of living there. It's very much focused on the characters. So you kind of feel at every moment of these boys developing relationship and their feelings changing and just the terrors of war, really. Awesome, thanks everyone, bye.
Thanks, Eliza. That was so much fun. And again, my TBR has gone up. If anyone has any questions for Eliza, though that was a video, she is actually here. So just pop those in the chat if you have any questions for Eliza.
Okay.
Yeah, Maria can't wait to read them also.
Yay.
No, well, we're all quiet on the questions.
I would like to know if any libraries are like have any standing displays of queer fiction, or like how do other libraries like what are they doing in terms of promoting queer fiction, or are they not? Or yeah, that's what I would like to know. Because we at my library, we aren't really doing a lot in terms of, you know, articulating that, you know, this collection is available and, you know, here are these titles. We don't have a special space for any queer fiction. They're just sort of within the YA or junior fiction. Well, not junior, would be more YA. And yeah, so we don't really have any special subgenre locating practices, but I'd love to know if anyone does.
Can you folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry. So at our library, all of in the YAF collection, also now in the adult collection and our graphic novels, even on our picture books, we do little rainbow stickers just to make it visually there. Especially, I think it's especially important in our YAF collections because some teens might be questioning and might not feel comfortable approaching staff members. So we've kind of done it like that.
That's
all
awesome.
the displays we do, generally speaking, or any RA list, we generally try to be inclusive. So we try to have own voices, people of color, a gender balance. So generally just when we do any RA, it's something we keep in mind. I think it's like important everywhere, but I personally feel especially with children and people developing, like you want to make sure everyone feels seen and heard.
Yeah.
For Mardi Gras, we did a display downstairs. We got like a little cute note from two of our patrons, and they were just like, oh, it was so nice to come into our local library and see our little rainbow family represented, which was really sweet.
Yeah.
So I think it's just doing stuff like that, and it's a general thing, trying to have it incorporated in everything that you do. I think the rainbow stickers are really valuable here. I'm really happy we have them. Yeah. But yeah, so in any kind of list we do, we just try to have some representation there, and like in all of our different collections. I'm a big fan of it. And just, yeah, when you do any RA, just always make sure that you have some titles in there. And if you're like having trouble with finding stuff, you know, use like Novelist and stuff like that. I mean, you can use other resources too. So it's trying to have that representation there. And then, you know, for Mardi Gras, like June, Pride Month, you have a reason, like an excuse really to do a display. And you can do that with your picture books. You can do that with YAF, adult, whatever collection you want to do. Yeah.
And do you guys place the stickers on yourselves, or does your supplier do that?
So we do it ourselves. We do it in the library. We got some rainbow stickers specially printed out. So yeah, we do them like I do it on some of the kids stuff when we're assessing. Our catalog is all really awesome, and we'll do it as well. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. That's a good idea. And do people have also like stickers in the library, like that it's a welcome space, or?
Yeah. Yeah, we're an ACON safe, so we have like it on our front. We have it on our like your doors are still as you come in, and we have it posted downstairs as well. So you clearly know this is like LGBTQI people are protected here, like racially diverse people. So we have it, yeah, we're a safe place. So we have that at the front of the library. We have it downstairs again in the kids section, just because I think it's really important for teens and vulnerable people and just vulnerable communities and like in general to know that they can feel safe here.
Right. And is there a particular like group that you get the stickers from, or that does that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can give you some, do you want me to send some stuff to Helen later? I can send you some info. Yeah. So what you do is you kind of, for some of the ACON safe space stuff, you actually have to like apply for it.
Okay.
You have to apply for it, and there are some requirements you need to kind of fulfill. Like there's like some questions, but I can try to like get some info together and send it.
Is that the Welcome Here project?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's really good to know. I didn't know that we had, but I'm pretty sure that we aren't on the directory.
You just double check, and then you can also, for that type of stuff, like you can also just double check like with your council's like inclusive like LGBTQI policy as well, because a lot of councils already have the basis for that, so it kind of ties in what councils generally want to do. So it'll give you backing and the support to be able to do that most probably.
All right. If you send that information to Ellen, then we can put that on the wiki.
Yeah, I'll try to get some info together for that too. Yeah, I can do that, no problem.
There was a question here from Lisa at Canterbury Bankstown about how in our culturally diverse community, how do we explain the concepts of LGBTQI in a way that can be more sensitive if asked about why we have the resources that meet the needs of all our community?
Sorry, so
that is a long sentence.
Yeah, sorry, it was a wait. Oh, wait, there you go. I'm just going to look at chat so I can read that. Just a second. I mean, I think that's, I mean, as a general thing, I mean, like sensitivity aside, like, do you mean, are you like worried about people saying things? I mean, for me, I kind of see it as like, I've never had anyone's, well, we have, but I've kind of said it's like anything. We're a public space. This is a space for everyone. We want everyone to feel welcome and inclusive. We're not a censoring board. There's information for everyone. So like, if there's a resource that you want to use, you can use it. If you don't want to borrow LGBTQI stuff, you don't have to. So, I mean, I've had personal conversations with people. Is there like an exact thing you're kind of worried about? Like, is it more you're wanting to explain like what certain things mean, or just so I can clarify? Yeah.
Lisa, would you like to clarify? But I think you've answered it really well, Eliza. We are public libraries for everybody, and everybody is catered for.
Yeah, so if you ever have like an encounter, something, a situation like that, that's how you express it. Like, we're a place for everyone, and there's material for you and there's material for someone else, and you don't have to borrow that. That doesn't mean we don't have to have it. That just means you can choose not to borrow it. Yeah, just I'd be really chill about it, and usually people react well, and if they don't, I mean, that's really kind of how they're going to react to things.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. That was very helpful. So if there are no more questions for Eliza, we will go to Jay Fletcher, who will be sharing with us Cli-Fi novels.
Hello. Hopefully I'm nice and audible.
Yes.
Excellent. Cool. All right. So yeah, I'm talking about the cheery subject of climate fiction. And I've tried to select from, around different genres and forms and that kind of thing to get a little bit of a variety. I haven't gone with like big obvious ones. So like Oryx and Crake is not on this list, and the Ministry of the Future and things like that. But, I wanted to find a few things that were just a little bit different and interesting. So the first one I've got is The Last Albatross by Ian Irvine. This one is, it's a great example of like straight up and down genre fiction. It's a climate novel. It's an eco thriller with not a lot of other bells and whistles on it, apart from a little bit of sci-fi. It's really fast paced, really suspenseful. It's jam packed with plot and characters. It's kind of what he's known for. Ian Irvine is he's an Australian author. Which is great, but really beloved in the fantasy sci-fi community. He's got a lot of series published, really, really well known. This one, it's quite it's very realistic and grim. It's his interpretation of what the world will look like once climate change has, wreaked havoc on politics and the economy, and sort of life in general. The plot itself is quite buck wild. It's about a disgruntled kind of manic engineer who steals a bunch of plutonium and plans to wipe out humanity to save Earth from us and humanity. And then it sort of goes on a wild chase through like green cults and organized crime and eco-terrorists. And it's just a very sort of exciting kind of racy read. And I think that this is the kind of book that you could like recommend to someone who was just sort of like getting into climate fiction, was interested in that sort of, one fast ride, not a lot of literary interest, not a lot of sort of like didn't want fantasy elements in it. It's quite sort of grounded in today, and an idea of quite a plausible dystopia of environmental destruction. And it's also the first in a trilogy, so you kind of get a three for one reader's recommendation in there. So I'm going to go into sort of more the literary end of Cli-Fi and talk a little bit about The Stone Gods by Jeanette Winterson. For those of you who don't know, Jeanette Winterson is probably most well known for Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, which is her sort of fictionalized memoir of coming out as lesbian to an evangelical family at 16 and leaving home. It's an amazing book. This one is sort of her take on the climate change question in society. It was written in 2008, and it's very, very satiric, very darkly funny and quick. But she's also a brilliant sort of very lyrical writer. So the writing is sort of like very gorgeous and very transcendent. But the story itself is like a futuristic adventure that explores humankind's relationship to the environment and power and technology. And it's kind of broken up into three sections where two versions of characters meet each other and fall in love in the three timelines in a setting where they're facing imminent annihilation of the environment for various reasons. So it really goes through exploring humanity's habit of just despoiling, pristine environments when we arrive at them. The satire in it is like quite pronounced and quite witty. There's terms like state-approved mass illiteracy and genetic fixing and things like that. There's a whole plot thread where humankind attempts to colonize a new pristine blue planet because they've destroyed their own, but they have to fire an asteroid at it to wipe out the dinosaurs before they can move there. It doesn't go well. So this is one of those examples of speculative fiction being used to talk about our current issues. And it's very LGBTQ plus diverse. I absolutely loved all of those recommendations from before. It's really funny. She's a real master of wit. And the story itself is like an Odyssey style plot through, they take voyages across space and across time. It's really whimsical and a really sort of very profound, well-executed read. So the next one I'm going to talk about a YA example of climate fiction, young adult fiction, and it's called Orleans by Sheri L. Smith. Sorry, I'm speeding up a bit because I feel like I'm talking too much. So yeah, great YA read by a really cool Black American writer. It's set in like New Orleans, Louisiana, sort of like in like the mid-century in the future. After the Gulf Coast has been destroyed by hurricanes and a deadly virus, and the whole Gulf Coast has been walled off, and the survivors on the inside just left to sort of like fall into anarchy and chaos. The main character is a young Orleans teen who speaks in dialect, so it's got own voices in it. But sort of, yeah, what sort of makes it fit into this category is that it is set with, full-blown environmental destruction, strong elements of government tyranny, which is a real kind of tropey feature of a lot of climate fiction. The fact that the US government went and walled off this whole area to keep, people suffering from a deadly virus out. Prescient. A lot of this is quite prescient, and it explores. It's sort of Sheri's exploration of what would happen if a society of people, the region of Louisiana and the Gulf Coast were left with a destroyed environment and no authority. And in the setting of this book, people organize themselves into tribes according to blood type, and they have to trade blood transfusions to fight off the virus. So it's kind of harrowing stuff, but still like quite a good comprehensive read for both young adult audiences and adults as well. I loved it. So yeah, it's got great sympathetic main characters. The story itself is like a road trip story. So the main character is trying to get a newborn baby out of this ravaged zone over the wall and into the outer states. That's sort of the MacGuffin of the tale. And it does have a sequel as well. So you get to sort of like find out more about their adventures and their journey. So yeah, Orleans, really good one. I rate it. Okay, so this one I'm excited to talk about. It's Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. So Octavia Butler, she's described as the mother of Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is like, Black writers, writing spec fic, writing sci-fi, all that kind of stuff. It's like a really diverse, fascinating genre. This was written in 1993, and it's set in the now times, so 1920s to 1925. And because of that, and because of sort of how prescient and visionary Butler was in her writing career, this book, this is a graphic novel version of the book because I couldn't get my hands on the actual one, but it's also very good. This book has hit the New York Times bestseller list recently for the first time ever. So a lot like Octavia Butler's work is really coming back into the fold, into the conversation, and a lot of that has to do with just how telling and incredible she is at talking about humanity and how we cope with all kinds of change, and in this case climate change. This one, again, has set in a society that's completely collapsed because of environmental destruction, technological failings, and is similar to Orleans. It's possible that Sheri L. Smith took some inspiration in it, in that it's a young female character who has to flee her safe gated community and go on the road. The main character has like a condition in the setting of the story where she feels other people's emotions really strongly, it's a way that, you could have a character that can get into the heads of other people in the story. It's a really interesting way to tell the story of a people. And this is one of those climate fiction books that is real bleak, obviously in many ways, but the whole thing, like in the way that speculative fiction often does, it turns on hope for positive change, hope for better change. All of the main characters in it, spoilers, they end up setting about trying to make a better society for themselves so that they can live, as humans are intended to, socially and safely. So it's very, very readable. The main character is like really charismatic. She's fun to be with. You'll just fall in love with her. Really culturally diverse. Another example of own voices. It's bleak and haunting, but really, really thought-provoking. And I think for anyone wanting to get into cli-fi or wanting to understand the history of cli-fi, this one is a must-read. All right, real quick, I'll sum up with my last book, which is a little bit of a cheat because it's an anthology of short stories. But I wanted to include it because it does have some of those big names I mentioned at the top. So there's short stories in here by Margaret Atwood, Paolo Bacigalupi, Kim Stanley Robinson, and a whole bunch of others. Oh no, I'm blanking on her name. No. Charlie Jane Anders. It's 26 short stories, and it's again it's again an example of why writers write climate fiction, and they do it because they want to talk about a real thing that's happening to humanity, and a lot of these stories. When you're reading through it, you see the author's passionate desire to promote taking action on climate change before it's too late. The characters in the stories suffer a lot, yes, and content warnings for all of these stories, like they're all violent and dark, and characters suffer, but they sort of they do it to talk about what's happening to the world now. Like a lot of speculative fiction writers and people who write about the future say they're not predicting, they're not prophets, they're not predicting what will happen, they're just taking what is in the world now and extrapolating from there. And yeah, this is a great way, again, like a gateway into climate fiction for anyone, because you'll read the words of all of the big names in climate fiction and have a great idea of where to go next. So great introduction to the genre, a great guide for those who want to explore more. And just have a pillow to scream into as you go. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jay. That was also really, really helpful. If anyone has any questions for Jay, you can pop those in the chat or speak up now.
Thank you, Maria. Your list was great too.
And if any of the covers were hard to see during any of these talks, we will be sharing the full list on the wiki, so you don't need to worry if you've missed one. Okay, well, thank you very much, Jay.
Ooh, thanks. Bye.
Bye. So now is the time for us all to just hop on the chat and share 5 books of our own in a genre or subgenre of your choice. And you can also share one of the reader's advisory tools that you were talking about before. Yeah, so do that in chat. You might need to pop over to your Goodreads. Oh, sorry, I haven't started my video. You might need to pop over to your Goodreads to see 5 books in a particular genre or subgenre and just share those in the chat. That's right, isn't it, Ellen? We're not going to a breakout room.
No, that's right.
Yeah. So share 5 books in a genre or subgenre of your choice in the chat, and maybe share one of the RA tools that you became excited about after I talked before. Completely exploding. You can keep putting your top 5 in particular genres in the chat if you like. Thanks everybody so much for sharing, and I want to thank everybody so much for coming along today and yesterday to our online RA seminar. All the slides and videos and even all of the chat will be available on the wiki next week. Do save that wiki so you can use it all the time for your own professional development, for training purposes, all of that sort of thing. There will be an evaluation sent out tomorrow by email, or you could do it now. There's a link on the wiki for today's seminar page if you'd like to fill that in now to help us to continue to provide these seminars and have them be as useful as possible. But yeah, thank you so much everybody for participating in the seminar, and I hope to see you in the real next year.